So I got a new toy I wanted to try out, and what better game than THQ's answer to the entire Call of Duty series? The game is called Homefront, and let me just throw this out there. I'm sure I'll get hated for it, but I don't give a shit. I enjoy the Modern Warfare series better than Black Ops, mainly because I enjoy the more modernized weapons and settings. However, upon saying that, it's highly disappointing to see how short the series' single-player campaigns are, and to see that it seems like the main focus is on the online multiplayer. I get it, it's fun to shoot other people in the head. I'm an FPS guy myself. But on saying that, I just can't justify spending $60 a year on COD game when I know it's going to be the same as last time, just with slight modifications. Okay, I'm done with my COD rant. You're probably asking where that came from, and the answer is simple. Homefront is Call of Duty. If you switch to THQ with Activision, you wouldn't notice a huge difference. Now, Homefront isn't an exact clone, but it's close enough. And before I go any further, let me explain something else. I don't buy games for online portions. I buy games for the single-player pieces. I'm going to be reviewing Homefront strictly on the offline campaign, and not touching upon the online portion at all. So if you've come to this review wondering how it compares to COD on the competitive side, you may as well hit stop now. Upon starting the game, you get a nice, moderately long intro scene describing what has happened in the past few years. In a nutshell, the old leader of North Korea dies, and his son is named a new leader. He unites both North and South Korea together, and promotes peace. Right before taking over a large part of the world. The US is included on this takeover, and that's where you start. You play as Robert Jacobs, an ex-Marine pilot. Jacobs is taken prisoner by the Korean army to be sent to a re-education camp. Jacobs boards a bus and witnesses some disturbing scenes with the town being taken over. Soon after, a vehicle crashes into the bus, and two members of the local resistance cell, Connor and Rihanna, save Jacobs. Somehow, these resistance members, along with the frontman, a police officer named Boone, knew about Jacobs' past experience with helicopters and requests his assistance for their cause. Jacobs escapes the bus and begins a long, treacherous trek through 7 stages to get a bunch of fuel tankers to the American military so that they can effectively square off against the Korean patrols. You may be thinking, wow, only 7 levels? Isn't that really short? And yeah, it is, but at the same time it isn't. Each stage can take about 45 minutes or so to complete. So if you round it, you got about 6 hours of playthrough. Yeah, it's pretty short, but I think THQ was aiming for the idea that they didn't want to draw it out too long. You start off in the town, fighting from block to block. The story plays out well, and all the areas in each level are well designed and flow seamlessly into each other. There's no point in time where you're wondering how you got to a certain area. One of the most memorable areas is the farm. It's home to a bunch of extreme survivalists. Their motives conflict with the resistance, and you end up fighting them to get to a helicopter that they have commandeered from some Koreans. However, much of the conflicts between the Resistance and the other NPCs might be because of one of the members of the cell that travels with you. His name is Hopper, and he's a Korean American. He's the tech guy of the group, and he comes in handy quite a bit. He understands why people are wary of him, but is always trying to assure everyone that he's not part of the enemy. Of course, no one really ever believes him. Since I'm going on about character backstories, that's one of the most interesting things about the game. There's only a small handful of teammates that you'll be in contact with, and each of them has a distinct personality to them. Boone is the leader of the local resistance cell, and plays the calm and collected guy. I've already touched on Hopper being the tech guy, and he actually shows emotion when the group needs to strap a shitload of C4 onto his automated Humvee. Connor is always entertaining to listen to, mainly because he's the stereotypical angry, every enemy must die kind of guy. Rihanna is the quiet one, that is only doing this because she knows it's right, but often her ideals come into question when she needs to kill somebody. One of the recurring themes in the game is when Rihanna and Connor start disagreeing on something. Rihanna is always thinking about humane treatment of others, while Connor doesn't care how a person dies. And on occasion, he doesn't even care if they're on the same team. He simply states at one point in the game that all Resistance members know what they're getting into when they got involved. It's little things like this that really make the game's story and characters believable. In order to make the game even more realistic, of course you have to put in some licensed buildings and companies. The problem with this is that the game often seems to cram them down your throat, whether or not you care that it's there, and they just feel like gimmicks. For example, a good portion of the 3rd stage takes place in a large firefight at a TigerDirect.com store. Honestly, I didn't even know TigerDirect had brick and mortar stores. Who knows, maybe they actually do, but I don't care. At one point, there's the Hooters you blast through. You also fight through a White Castle. Now, it's one thing that you're fighting through one of these places, but often the characters will remind you that you're in there. For example, for the Hooters, Connor will yell something like "Sniper in the Hooters." At White Castle, he'll scream, "We'll need to go through White Castle." It just makes me wonder how much money they got paid just to include those things and announce them for something that stays on the screen for 5 minutes tops. But of course, since this is a first-person shooter, there's gotta be guns involved, right? Good thing for you, there's a decent selection of them. Of course you get your standard M16 and M4, but along for the ride is a SCAR, including a machine gun variant, an M249, an M110, and an ACR, and a few other interesting guns as well. You can carry 2 at a time, and can swap them as necessary. Of course, there's a good amount of modifications and sights available for them too. My only thing is that there's a real lack of shotguns in the game. Now, there is a shotgun available, but you don't get it very often. I understand that most of the comment is range firefights, and shotguns wouldn't have been very effective, but it still would have been nice to have the option. For example, you could have been running around with the M4 as a primary rifle, and when going around smaller, more confined rooms, swap to the shotgun. One of the things I wish they would have done more with is the helicopter. Basically, you finally get access to it, and Jacobs has to pilot it to hijack 3 fuel tankers. Upon doing so, you use the chopper to cover the tankers from enemy fire. It's a really fun level to play, as the whole thing takes place with you driving the Halo. It's simple enough to fly, and it's a blast to take down enemy tanks and APCs that start shooting at you, but it just feels underutilized. It would have been awesome to see at least one more stage once you fly it, or even near the end for one final push. Instead, at the end of the game, you get control of a remotely manned turret that's in a warplane flying around the battlefield. This doesn't occur for very long, as the plane soon runs out of gas and needs to head back. Again, it's something that seems to have been thrown in, but it doesn't use it often enough. I'm not going to give away the ending, being that the game is still relatively new, but all I can say is that it's worth the playthrough, and it's depressing as hell. It does, however, seem to set up for a sequel, but with THQ going belly up recently, who knows if a Homefront 2 will ever surface. That's about it for the game. It's not Call of Duty, but damn it, it gets close enough to it. This doesn't mean that the game isn't fun though. There's always a bunch of plot twists and things that will keep you guessing what's going to happen next. It could definitely have used a few more levels, but what you're given is a good, solid game. Definitely play it if you're a militaristic FPS fan, as you're not going to be disappointed. Final score? 8 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.